Rodney Habib is a two-time New York Times best-selling author, an internet celebrity known for his educational blogging, video making, animal activism, and his books, The Forever Dog and The Forever Dog Life. Habib is the founder of Planet Paws, the most liked and visited pet health page on Facebook. He openly criticizes prescription diets for pets and warns against commercial pet foods. As a big polarizing character in the pet world, he's loved and hated, sometimes in equal measure, and a lot of people criticize him, including certain vets. So in this video, we are going to go over some of the wildest claims he makes, and we will be debunking them. Hello, my name is Sam. I'm a dog and cat nutritionist and proud owner of a chain of independent pet shops here in the UK, where we exclusively solve problems with nutrition. So nutrition is our forte. So let's look at the first claim he's made, and this is on flea and tick. So he shared this document where he said that scientists raise alarm over common yet deeply concerning practice for pet owners. Vets should stop. Vets urge to cut pesticide flea treatments amid river pollution fears. Pet owners using these flea and tick treatments risk contaminating their hands with neurotoxic insecticides for at least 28 days after the treatment has been applied, according to research by the University of Sussex and Imperial College London. Now, I don't really want to go into these precise medication, but there's something that he doesn't really cover here that is extremely important, and this has to do with flea and tick medication for pet parents. And I am of the belief that if you do not see any fleas or worms, then you shouldn't apply the treatment. Now, there are a lot of businesses out there, including certain vets, that will put you on a monthly subscription for flea and worming tablets or treatments for your dog or cat, and I don't think you should be doing that every single month. If you do not see any fleas, if you do not see any worms, then why are we giving our pets medication they don't really need? I mean, do you take paracetamol before you get a headache? This would be very similar to that. The problem we see a lot of the times with a lot of the tablets and a lot of the treatments we give our pets is that they put unnecessary pressure on our pets' liver, and that over time can create certain problems and certain things we don't want to encounter. So whenever it comes to pet treatments and flea and tick medication, I would urge you to think twice about what you are giving your pet. And it is my belief that if my dog or my cat gets worms and I see the worms or I see the fleas, then I apply the treatment. I am not by any means a science denier. I love science and I trust science. That's why I love flea and tick medication whenever it's needed. But if it isn't needed, then it isn't needed. So I think that Rodney here agrees with me. A lot of these flea and tick medications cannot be used by default every single month. The second claim here has to do with what happens when you feed dogs a milk bone every day. I mean, milk bones, very, very popular. All hail the #1 selling dog treat in the world, owned by J.M. Smucker, the milk bone. We anticipate our total dog snacks portfolio to grow approximately 3% annually over the next 2 years to $1 billion, reports the company. Brazilian and Canadian scientists apparently are not particularly rejoicing in the success of all the milk bones being sold and consumed by dogs. Now, food coloring dyes may be leading dogs to express anxiety and potential unwanted behaviors. Today, studies show over 70% of dogs have some kind of highly problematic behavior. They also say that some of these synthetic food dyes are also used in human food that are linked to hyperactivity and behavioral problems in children. I do not know you and I don't know too much about behavior, but when it comes to diet, what I think these milk bones represent are the most ultra processed food you can present your pet with, and that cannot be good. If you look at some of the ingredients, in these milk bones, so a lot of the commercial treats you get presented in your big box retailer, your Walmart, your Costco, whatever, those treats are heavily processed. They are ultra processed, and they contain ingredients that are absolutely dismal for the health of our pets. And I am not really against you giving whatever you want to your dog. However, when it comes to normalizing treats and normalizing things for our pets, it is a lot better to give our dogs something minimally processed. When it comes to treats, you can give them single protein treats, 100% chicken, 100% kangaroo, 100% ostrich based treats. You can give them sprats, you can give them sardines. You have to be careful with treats and make sure they don't overconsume total calories. But when it comes to treats, he is absolutely right. The fact that milk bones are the most sold treat in the United States is absolutely gobsmacking, and they make an absolute fortune. You know for sure that if you eat a bar of Snickers every single day, you aren't going to be better off. You are going to be putting in your body things that aren't very good for you and that aren't very healthy. And as long as you know what you are doing, then that is okay. So if you want to give your dog a milk bone every now and then why not? But to make that a staple of your dog's diet, I agree, is a really bad choice. On another post, he shared that almost 60% of today's pets are overweight or obese, and maybe this has something to do with it. And he points out the 1 to 8% carbs of the evolutionary diet compared to 48% carbs of today's diet. And he rightly points out that the cancer, obesity, arthritis, and diabetes are all on the rise as a result of this. Now, let me tell you something. Carbs are not the problem. The problem is highly palatable, caloric dense foods, and those highly palatable caloric dense foods are now seeping into commercial pet food, and so it's a lot easier for your pet to overconsume calories every single day. When we look at isotopic labeling studies, we see that carbohydrates and protein do not convert into fat as much as fat does. So fat is essentially and inherently lipogenic, which means that fat makes you fat. And less than 2% carbohydrates, excess carbohydrates, get converted into fat. Again, when you look at isotopic labeling studies. And the same has to do with protein. Your body either consumes protein or oxidizes protein. Now, let me go back to our dogs and cats' diets. Our dogs are more carnivorous than anything else, and cats are obligate carnivores. So I do not think that you should give your dog too many carbohydrates, or you should give your cat any carbohydrates whatsoever. But I don't think that singling out carbohydrates here is the reason why dogs and cats are more obese these days. The reason why dogs and cats are more obese is because of an overconsumption of calories. When you overeat and you put weight on, right, your fat tissues release something called adipokines, and these increase the risk of, he is right, pancreatitis, diabetes, and other health issues, other complications. But not because of sugar alone and not because of carbohydrates alone. It's because of total excess calories. So if your dog or cat is a little bit podgy, the best thing you can do is to reduce the overall amount of calories you give your dog. Now, I am going to agree with Rodney here that you should try to limit the amount of carbohydrates you feed your dog, but this is because of two things. The first thing is that dogs are more carnivorous than anything else, and this means that you should feed them a very, very high meat diet and a very, very low, if any, carb diet, whereas cats are obligate carnivores and they do not need any carbohydrates whatsoever. The second reason is that a lot of the refined carbohydrates a lot of these commercial pet foods include are, in my opinion, extremely detrimental to our pets' health. Wheat gluten, rice, barley, maize, and things like that aren't really biologically appropriate. Your dog is not going to all of a sudden start munching on corn. They just aren't going to do it because corn is a very cheap filler and it's extremely easy for a dog to overconsume calories when you give them a cereal based food or a corn based food. So yeah, the essential bit here is for you to keep your pet lean. That's going to surely increase the chances of you visiting the vet very, very rarely or sporadically, if ever. And if you're curious about what the best dog food is, you can check our free guide, How to Feed Your Dog Better. The link will be down below. It's free. Go get it. He then takes a bit of a dig at ultra-processed foods. Here the post reads, "Looks like a can of turkey and bacon, doesn't it? Please pay attention, don't be a victim of the pet food label game." And here we have 78% water, 12% meat byproducts, and we don't really know what meat byproducts are, what specifically they mean by meat byproducts. And then we have poultry byproducts, turkey and bacon. This is something that I keep on banging about every single day, and this is something that comes from our food. So these are some cookies or biscuits for kids or babies, and whenever you look at the front here, you will see that these contain all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the iron, all the calcium, and everything in theory a kid or a baby would need for them to enjoy a healthy snack. However, when I look at the back here, these contain sugar. If I just blindly trust manufacturers on what is best for me, just like cereal back in the 80s and 90s, when everything was fortified, when everything was incredibly nutritious and had all the vitamins and minerals and calcium we all needed growing up, when in reality there was a lot of sugar and there was a lot of overconsumption of calories unnecessarily. So whenever we look at pet food, just like we do with human food, I don't want you, like Rodney says, to blindly trust marketing and labeling, and I want you to turn the bag of food over. And if you see any sugar or sugar derivatives, then maybe that's not the right pet food. And if you see meat byproducts, or if you see something like natural flavors, or if you see something like meat byproducts, maybe that's not the right food for your dog. So absolutely correct. You should never trust marketing on the front alone. You should always read the ingredients. He also raised a question. He also asked a question. Question to you: do you think it's ethical for an ultra-processed food manufacturer to partner up with a national medical association, like cigarette companies back in the day sponsoring doctors? In other words, would it be okay if Coca-Cola worked alongside the American Medical Association to examine what it means to be healthy and to help find solutions? In the pet nutrition world, we know the British Veterinary Association and Mars Pet Care, makers of Royal Canin and Pedigree, are working together to examine the links between pet nutrition, human behavior, and healthy body weight in pets. Now, this is something that is absolutely infuriating and something that the majority of people simply aren't aware of. Let me tell you something. If I control the vast majority of pet food sales in the world, wouldn't it make sense for me to also control all the channels? For example, trade bodies like FEDIAF or AFCO. Would it not be worthwhile for me to have a seat at the table? Would it not be worthwhile for me to write the rules and regulations, for me to write the nutrition manuals veterinarians then read at university? And we know this because we have a couple freedom of information requests here in the UK, where a lot of these big food corporations, where if not bribing, they were getting something in exchange for benefits, for a seat at the table. What happens when one of these pet food corporations also has shareholding interest in veterinarian practices? What happens when those veterinarian practices sell the very products that shareholders want them to sell, because they also control that company, because they also have a seat at the board? Now, you cannot call them corrupt because this happens in every single industry, but you can call it for what it is, which is lobbying and control. What they are trying to do is control every single thing. They want to control the narrative, they want to control rules of regulations, and they want to do this behind a veil that we do not agree with. So it is absolutely right for Rodney to point this out, because this is something infuriating and something that the public doesn't really know much about. So whenever they get a food recommended at the veterinarian, at the corporate veterinarian, they do not know that the pet food company has a shareholding interest in that vet, and that the food they are being presented with, the food they are being recommended, that food comes from the top, and that food, that decision was made at a boardroom. That decision is simply a financial decision. He also says here that there's a study that showed that over 90% of dogs fed raw meat based diets had at least one or more nutritional imbalances when examined by diet calculations. And he went on to say that feeding a minimally processed diet is important, but feeding a diet formulated and balanced properly is even more important. And I think he's alluding to the rise of homemade pet food and DIY pet food, and this is something that also irks me. If you want to DIY your own food, you should rotate the meats. You cannot just give your dog chicken breast. That is absolutely ridiculous. You should study nutrition. If you want to feed your dog a raw meat diet, you have to do so responsibly. The amount of raw feeders we see every single day that do not feed any bone, they don't feed any liver, they do not add anything else for the dog apart from maybe one single recipe. They always get the same single recipe. That's not how you do DIY. So yes, absolutely spot on here. Feeding your dog a minimally processed diet is probably a lot better than feeding your dog an ultra processed diet. However, you have to do so responsibly. You do have to study nutrition. Maybe rely on a commercial raw food, on a brand that's reputable. Whenever it comes to eggs, this is something that doesn't get talked about enough in my opinion. Eggs are nature's multivitamin and the most nutritious dog snack on earth. Making eggs? Science recommends not tossing these shells right away. Instead, remove the thin membrane, the clear film lining, and add it to your dog's next meal, and you can do that raw. Eggs are one of the best sources of protein ever. They are so inexpensive and so nutritious, and if you think about it, they contain everything that is needed to harness life. When you look at protein quality of eggs, when you look at amino acid profiles of eggs, they should be a staple of our pet's diet. You can crack an egg open and you can feed it to your dog. You can literally just even mix the egg with the kibble, and that will provide them with added moisture, which is again vital for our pets. Eggs have such a high protein digestibility and biological value that, in my opinion, they are absolutely unmatched when it comes to nutrition. The one thing I kind of disagree with Rodney about is whenever he cites certain science, and I have made a couple of videos about it. What a lot of the pet food scientific studies show is the lack of scientific rigor when it comes to presenting things without a bias. In humans, we have the gold standard of science, and that's peer-reviewed human randomized controlled trials, where you go into a trial not knowing what you're getting, not having a say in what you're getting, and everything is randomized. So what you cannot do and will never do is tinker with the outcome. You will never see scientists or people go with a bias into a human randomized controlled trial that is then peer reviewed. In the pet food industry, virtually every single research paper I have read is a cohort study. And this happens everywhere. It happens in vegan dog studies or vegan cat studies as well, raw dog food studies and kibble studies. So this is across the board, and this is one of my gripes. And this has to do with cohort studies. If you are a raw feeder or you are a vegan, you are already indoctrinated in that particular ethos, in that particular creed, in that particular way of life. And if I want then to add you to one of these studies that allow aligns with your belief, and I then use observational data more than anything else to conduct a scientific study, what do you think the outcome is going to be? If you already subscribe to one particular ethos and we are going this particular way, what do you think the study is going to say? The study is going to say what you want the study to say. What will happen a lot of the time as well is that companies will literally have a stake and will fund a particular study, and they aren't really interested in the science. What they want to do is to get the label, to get scientifically proven on the product. What the consumer doesn't really know is that the company that has paid for the research has actually paid for the research and wants and has a stake in a particular outcome. And we can see this across the board. Kibble companies, raw feeding companies, and vegan dog diets. I would really like science to be as random as possible, to be peer reviewed, and to be as scientific as possible. What we cannot allow in the pet food industry is for cohort studies, really weak, biased, funded, control studies to control overall narratives, because that doesn't really do much for our pets. What it allows is for companies to control the narrative, and we don't want companies to control a narrative. We want science to control narratives. All in all, whenever you listen to him, he is quite basic in his approach. What he recommends is for you to pay attention to what you feed your dog or cat, to try to feed your pet a minimally processed diet. All in all, I don't think he's a wacko. I think he advocates for minimally processed foods being fed to pets, and that is something to champion. He's known for championing homemade diets, he's known for championing responsible feeding, and he is more on the natural spectrum. All in all, I just think that people who want the best for our pets, and for people who are paying attention to wholesome ingredients, to natural ingredients, to organic ingredients, are people you probably need to listen to. At least listen to them and see whether you align with their ethos or not. I don't think some of the statements are ridiculous. I think a minimally processed diet is a lot better than an ultra processed diet. Now, is whey protein, for example, ultra processed and is extremely beneficial for humans? Yes, it is. So not all ultra processed food is bad. Not all ultra processed ingredients are pernicious, they are malicious, they're really bad. However, a minimally processed food is probably a lot better than something ultra processed day in and day out and week in and week out for years and years and years. And when it comes to our pets, we probably want to treasure them a little bit more, and we want to be a bit more careful as to what we are feeding them. And anyone who's trying to tell you otherwise, and anyone who's trying to tell you not to pay attention to what you feed your pet and to trust science and to blindly trust companies because they have the best interest of your pet at heart, I think you need to pay close attention to those. But I mean, you tell me, what do you think?